Michael Torres sat alone in the upscale restaurant, his worn jacket a stark contrast to the polished marble and crystal chandeliers surrounding him. He clutched a small photo of his daughter Emma in his pocket, the edges soft from constant handling. When the woman across from him, Jessica, glanced at her phone for the third time in 10 minutes and suddenly stood up with a look of barely concealed disgust, he knew what was coming. She didn't even bother with an excuse. She just looked at his calloused hands, the faded jeans he'd ironed carefully that morning, and walked away without a word. The waiter's pitying glance cut deeper than any insult could have. Michael had been a single father for 3 years since his wife Sarah died from cancer, and every day felt like climbing a mountain with weights strapped to his chest. If you believe that kindness matters more than money, and that everyone deserves a second chance at happiness, please hit that like button, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. Your support means everything. Michael worked 2 jobs to provide for 8-year-old Emma. By day, he was a janitor at Richardson Tech Industries, one of the largest technology companies in Chicago. By night, he drove for a rideshare service until exhaustion forced him home. His sister Laura had convinced him to try the blind date, insisting he couldn't mourn forever, that Emma needed to see him smile again. But sitting there in that restaurant, watching Jessica's designer heels click away across the marble floor, Michael felt the familiar weight of inadequacy crushing his chest. He wasn't enough. He had never been enough. He paid for the water he'd nervously sipped and left. What Michael didn't know was that someone had witnessed the entire encounter. Catherine Richardson, the 58-year-old CEO of Richardson Tech Industries, had been dining in a private booth nearby. She'd watched the whole scene unfold with growing anger. Catherine had built her empire from nothing after escaping an abusive marriage 30 years ago. She recognized the look in Michael's eyes because she'd seen it in her own mirror once, the hollow exhaustion of someone fighting battles no one else could see. The next morning, Michael arrived at work at 5 a.m. as always, pushing his cleaning cart through the executive floor. He moved through the darkened offices like a ghost, invisible to the people who would fill these spaces in a few hours. When he reached Catherine Richardson's office, he cleaned with extra care, making sure every surface gleamed. He'd never met her personally, but he'd seen her photos in the company newsletter, read about her charitable work. She seemed like someone who actually cared. When Catherine arrived at 7, she found Michael finishing up in the hallway. She didn't announce herself. She simply watched him work, noting the precision, the quiet dignity in his movements. Then she did something that surprised even her assistant. She approached him directly and asked him to come to her office at noon. Michael's heart hammered. Had he done something wrong? Was he being fired? At noon, trembling slightly, Michael knocked on the massive oak door. Catherine welcomed him in, and what happened next shattered every defense he'd built around his heart. She told him she'd seen him at the restaurant. She told him she'd done some research, learned about his wife's death, his daughter, his grinding work schedule. Then she offered him something impossible. A position as facilities manager with triple his current salary, full benefits, and flexible hours so he could be there for Emma. But that wasn't all. Catherine's voice cracked as she shared her own story of struggle, of being judged and dismissed. She told Michael that she'd started a private fund years ago to help employees facing hardship, but she'd never found someone who embodied the kind of strength and character she valued most. She handed him an envelope. Inside was a check for $50,000, no strings attached, and a handwritten note that read, "Your worth isn't measured by someone else's inability to see it." Michael broke. 3 years of holding everything together, of being strong for Emma, of swallowing his pain, came pouring out. Catherine simply handed him tissues and waited. When he could finally speak, he asked why. Why him? Why such overwhelming generosity? Catherine's answer was simple, because someone had once done something similar for her when she had nothing, and she'd promised herself she'd pass it forward. She'd been waiting for the right person, someone genuinely good who'd been knocked down by life but kept getting back up. If this story touched your heart, please don't just scroll past. Take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and leave a comment telling us what kindness means to you. Before we end, please type kindness in the comments if you believe good people deserve good things. 3 months later, Michael stood in his new office, a photo of Emma on his desk beside one of Sarah. His daughter was thriving, her laughter filling their small apartment again. He'd been able to cut back to one job, to be present for school plays and bedtime stories. But more than the money or the title, Catherine's final act had given him something priceless. She'd restored his faith that he mattered, that his struggles weren't invisible, that somewhere in this hard world, people still saw each other's humanity. And every day, Michael looked for ways to pass that gift forward, one small kindness at a time, because he'd learned that sometimes the most broken people become the most beautiful healers.